Welcome to Eerie Echoes. In this video, we have 7 true scary stories from people who work alone or do their jobs in the dead of night. We're glad that you can join us today. During my second term in January, I worked as a lab student in Alert, Nunavut. Look it up, it's the northernmost inhabited place on Earth. It was the height of winter, and the world outside was shrouded in complete darkness. The atmospheric lab where I worked was located about 5 kilometers from the main base, and to reach our instruments, we followed lifelines marked by ropes strung between them. On one particularly blustery Wednesday, which was our designated day for collecting samples, the weather was a bit stormy but manageable. As the student, it was my responsibility to handle the flasking duties outside. I'd load a sleigh with evacuated flasks and trudge about 300 meters away from the lab, open the flasks to capture air samples, and then return to the lab. The samples were then sent south for analysis. To ensure the best possible samples, we always walked into the wind, which meant navigating without the lifelines. On this Wednesday, equipped with my headlamp, I ventured out into the profound darkness. A few hundred meters from the lab, everything suddenly went pitch black. I turned around, only to realize the lab, the station, and even the parking area had vanished into the void. I was alone, with nothing but a headlamp and a sleigh full of empty flasks. Panic set in. Without a radio or phone, which often didn't work in that remote area, and with no visible tracks to follow, I felt completely disoriented. My heart raced as I braced myself for the worst. I feared this might be the end. After what felt like an eternity of 2 minutes, the power flickered back on. I worked as an assistant in a morgue where, as a medical student, I had the opportunity to examine the bodies donated to the university. These bodies were kept in a massive walk-in freezer, which was equipped with a motion sensor system. If someone were to become trapped inside, an alarm would sound, alerting others to come and assist. On one occasion, I was working alone while my instructor was occupied with paperwork in a nearby building. I heard a lot of commotion, but I initially thought it might be coming from my instructor's office. Suddenly, the alarm blared, sending a jolt of fear through me. I panicked, thinking that my instructor might be trapped inside the freezer. As I rushed toward the freezer, my instructor unexpectedly appeared and grabbed my arm, saying, "I thought you were the one stuck inside the freezer." We both stood there, staring at the door, while he turned off the alarm and unlocked it. I stayed behind him, nervously holding a broom, ready for anything. When the freezer door finally opened, we found nothing that could have triggered the motion sensor. There was no one inside, at least no one living. I have a workspace in an old, former asylum that was originally built by monks and later transformed into a hospital during World War II. The building carries a heavy, eerie history. It's massive, with long, shadowy hallways and stern 1920s architecture. Brick archways loom overhead, and there are unsettling sculptures of monks that have long since vanished. I usually work late, often until 3 in the morning, and I'm typically the last person to leave. One winter night, after finishing up, I locked my office and headed towards the exit. The building was completely dark, and the wind outside was howling. Suddenly, I heard the sound of running footsteps echoing in the distance. Many footsteps, as if a group was sprinting through the corridors. Then silence. As I descended a flight of stairs, I caught a glimpse of small red lights blinking at the far end of a long, dark hallway. They flickered for just a moment before disappearing. By this point, I was thoroughly unnerved and quickened my pace towards the exit. Just as I turned a corner, the running footsteps returned, louder this time. I turned around, and before I could react, a group of kids suddenly screamed right in my face. My heart nearly stopped. It turned out they were playing a game of laser tag. One of their parents had lent them the keys to the building, and they were running around with their laser guns, the red lights I had seen earlier. They thought the place was empty and were just as shocked to see me, a tall figure in a trench coat, appear out of nowhere in the dark. I work in a highly secured building due to the valuable equipment we store. To reach my office, you must pass through 4 doors, each requiring a key card to access. The environment is very quiet and sterile. White walls, minimal furniture, gray floors, and an open ceiling exposing the ducts. The sound here tends to echo. One night, while I was working alone, I noticed someone else in the building. He wore a shirt similar to those worn by maintenance staff, but it was quite unusual because it was very late on a Saturday. He was also wearing jeans, whereas maintenance staff typically wear black pants. His presence unsettled me, so I locked my office door and stayed put. I could hear him pacing back and forth and trying the handle of my office door a couple of times. I also heard the beep of him attempting to use a keycard to unlock my door. Turned out that he wasn't actually employed there. He was the adult son of one of the workers, wandering the building in an attempt to steal items. His father's keycard, meant for handymen with restricted access, was ineffective at opening office doors. Handymen require appointments and must be let in, unlike cleaning staff or techs who have broader access. Security reviewed the footage and saw the attempted access and traced it back to his father's keycard. As a result, the son received a fine for trespassing, and his father lost his job. I once worked as a security guard at an abandoned hotel that sat right on the riverbank. The building had seen better days, with its rooms once boasting balconies that extended over the water. The hotel had been closed down for a while, and the owners had stripped it of nearly everything valuable. One quiet night, I was sitting in the security office when I heard a faint creaking noise. It sounded like footsteps moving from left to right on the floor above me. The hotel was built with a wooden frame, and the creaking reminded me of an old house settling under someone's weight. It sounded exactly like someone was walking down the hallway directly above where I was sitting. Curiosity and duty got the better of me, so I grabbed my flashlight and headed up to the next floor. The hotel was only 4 stories high but stretched out quite a distance, so the hallways seemed to go on forever. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed the bare walls, the empty rooms without doors, and a single dim light bulb hanging from the ceiling in the middle of the corridor. I've watched enough horror movies to know that this situation was a red flag, but I kept walking down the hall. It was my job, after all, to make sure no one was trespassing. About a quarter of the way down the hallway, I heard a rustling noise coming from one of the rooms. I instinctively tightened my grip on my mag light, preparing for whatever might be inside. Cautiously, I peeked into the room, only to discover that the wind from the river was blowing in through a broken window, causing the tattered remains of a curtain to flutter. A bit shaken, I decided to check the other floors, but I found nothing out of the ordinary. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was in the building with me. Eventually, I made my way back down to the ground floor and wandered into the old ballroom. The space was wide open, with nothing but shadows and echoes to keep me company. As I scanned the room, I suddenly caught movement out of the corner of my eye. My heart raced as I spun around and aimed my flashlight, ready to defend myself. But when the beam of light hit the figure, I realized it was just my own reflection in a shattered mirror on the wall. That was enough for me. I decided to spend the rest of my shift in the safety of my car, parked outside. A couple of weeks later, the hotel burned down. To this day, I still believe there was someone or something in that building with me that night, though I never found any evidence to prove it. I used to work as a night cleaner at a large movie theater. Our shift officially began at 4 a.m., and we would clean until the doors opened at 11 a.m. To save time and keep our jobs, we'd sometimes arrive just as the last screenings were wrapping up and catch some sleep in one of the empty theaters, making sure we were up and ready by the start of our shift. Our usual routine involved using electric leaf blowers to clear the aisles, sending popcorn and trash flying down to the bottom where we could easily collect it. Then, we would manually clean the seats for any leftover debris or anything particularly gross. This method was efficient but incredibly loud, so it was easy to get lost in the noise and focus on the task at hand. The theaters were fully lit to make cleaning easier, and typically we were the only ones in the building at that hour. Whenever something odd happened, we would usually just blame it on each other. But there was one rule we all followed without exception. stay out of the projection booth. There was no need to go up there. We didn't clean it. All our supplies were on the main floor, and most importantly, the place had a reputation for being haunted. There's something about theaters and projection booths. No matter what, you always get the eerie feeling that someone's watching you. Imagine this. You're half deaf from the noise of the blowers, cleaning an empty theater, and you glance up at the projection booth, only to see someone standing there and staring at you. It's enough to make your heart skip a beat, especially when you step out into the hallway and find your coworker busy in another theater. Then, you both decide to check the exits at either end of the building, hoping to catch whoever it was, only to find no one. We decided it was best not to mess with it. I used to work the night shift at a large hardware store. There was a period when our store decided to stay open 24 hours for about a week. It wasn't really an issue most of the time. People generally don't shop for home improvement items at 3 in the morning, except for that one couple who came in at 2 a.m. looking for kitchen tiles. And then there was the young woman who wandered in just after midnight, right after my first break, searching for a very specific type of light fixture. She was dressed in denim shorts and a traditional white martial arts uniform with a black belt. She was oddly particular about which fixture she wanted. But the real story involves the insulation aisle. It was close to 3 a.m., and I was with a coworker stocking insulation and tidying up the aisles. A pile of large insulation rolls had toppled over, and as I was sorting through them, a hand suddenly shot out from the mess and grabbed my arm. I freaked out so badly that my coworker panicked too, and even our supervisor, who was on the other side of the store, came running to see what was happening. It turned out that a homeless man had somehow entered the store earlier, probably before the night crew started, and decided to make himself a cozy little nest in the insulation. He was in rough shape, clearly intoxicated, and we had to call the police to help get him out. After that incident, I was definitely more cautious around the insulation. At least for the rest of the time, the store stayed open 24 hours. And there we have 7 true horror stories from real people. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more scary stories. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.